guess who's back? Back again. I was gonna do a bit with this hat, but apparently my head is so big around this way that that's about as far as it goes on my head. So if I ever want to do like a pilgrim joke, I guess, I'll pull it out again. But until then, yeah. So, first thing, we've had a bit of a production downgrade. Now, this is because these shits here, these little like Chinese microphones.
朋友是一个坚韧不拔的纪录片，在香港这座城市的设置。
That I got on Amazon, but I guarantee you probably came from fucking Temu or some shit. Sound like rat shit, as my Holy Roman Empire video clearly showcases. I had a pair of these that were for Lightning USB for my old phone, and those worked pretty good. But I don't know how to. I can't find an equivalent for USB-C. So I got along. My best performing video is done without a mic. So who needs it? Who needs it? It is 3 a.m. Because whenever I get the motivation to do anything, it always comes in at 3 a.m. However, the question that may be on your mind first and foremost, if you know of my existence previous to this video, is, hey Alex, where have you been? Haven't uploaded since February. And I hear you. Not to worry, I am back. I will be trying to upload. I'm not gonna make any promises, man. I'm not gonna make any promises. But I'm back. Where was I? That's kind of a complicated question. The simplest answer is the funny zone. So yeah, I went overseas for like 5 months. A lot of it was spent in the Balkans. Had a good time. Got ligma and had to get an emergency flight home from Istanbul. So that was fun. I passed out on the plane. That's never happened to me before. I don't like that. Anyway, since I've been gone, I made the foolish attempt to try and get traditionally published once again, and was kept on the hook by a particular publisher whose name I will not name for 5 months, going through the entire acquisitions process before, right at the last minute, being dropped. And then they said they would take a look at it if I made some changes, and I asked them what they meant when they said the writing is not up to par for an adult audience. I don't know if that means it's bad or if that means it's written like a YA novel. I don't know what that means. I'm gonna try my best to address it, but I am not sending it back to them because I have a modicum of self-respect. So that shit's getting self-published maybe before August. It was good enough to get the attention of a traditional editor, so in my head, it's probably better than most YouTuber books, so I'm comfortable with that. Anyway, now that I'm back, we should get into the actual video, right? The actual thing. Also, I don't know, I wore this for a bit that I maybe half-baked at best, and it is like 80 degrees in this room because I have a heater on constantly. We should get into the actual video. So what's this actual video about? If you haven't read the title, I'd be I'd question your ability to read a little bit, but Britain.
I just woke up in a fucking steaming mood, yeah? Because I live in a shithole!
I've just started this calypso. It is fucking minging. Paradise punch lemonade. It is fucking minging. Suck your dad. It's minging, it's fucking minging.
I'm a fighter and not a quitter. I am resigning.
Once the prestigious owner of a quarter of the globe, though not contiguously, and the hegemon of the Industrial Revolution, it makes one wonder how a country with the most advanced technology, powerful military, and largest empire in all of history up until that point went from the shadow looming over the oceans that defines pretty much every major Asian nation's national character to
the Queen.
I mean, they had everything going for them. They had it made. Naval superiority, a head start on the Industrial Revolution, a cultural heritage which, let's be honest, some cultures are better at propagating than others. And this one was pretty damn good at it. Now Britain is living so much in their former glory that the geniuses sitting in Parliament thought their economy would be so strong that they could survive without the EU, and their government had this wild idea that if they just didn't have enough of something, they could import it like it's whatever, and like they still owned the oceans. Hate to tell you, but that's us now. Frankly, I kind of get it. The EU, kind of annoying, but look, come on, guys. Meanwhile, the victims of Britain's nanny state, i.e. their own citizens, aren't doing too hot in any statistic you look at, except for the fact that every time I buy something in pounds, I have to divide that by 3 and then add it to the original value, because for some goddamn reason, the Great British Pound is still fucking way up there. Oh, and the existence of Greggs, although that comes with the cost of a rising obesity rate, so you win some, you lose some, you know? So what the hell went wrong? My name is Alexander Hill, and I've personally gone undercover in Britain, not to be confused with the North Atlantic garbage patch. The things I've seen will shock you. I've lived among them, spoken like them, eaten like them, shopped like them. I've watched the Euro Cup. I've paid London prices. And today, I'm here to tell you all, it's not really that much of a mystery. The government fucked it all up. Now, I know there are some people who don't like the idea of just automatically blaming the government for everything, which, fair enough, without evidence, sure. But when it's true, I assure you I will explain everything to the best of my ability. But before we get into that, it'd be really cool of you to leave a like on the video, subscribe, and turn on the bell if you want to see whatever the fuck I do here. I need a better channel description. Also, I'm going to refer to Britain, the British Empire, and the UK interchangeably. I might even say England a couple times. For those of you who want to get all pissy in my comments section, actually, it's not just Britain, it's the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Shove it up your ass and figure out your naming conventions for your clusterfuck of an island, or let me say what I want. Although I know that's not a very popular position among your politicians these days. So I think first we should emphasize that there's a difference between being at the height of your power and being at your greatest extent. Because whenever you Wikipedia an empire, it always shows a map of that empire at its greatest extent. That doesn't necessarily mean that was the point when they were at their highest amount of power. I would say Britain's height of power was somewhere in the 1850s. Even though the empire would eventually double its size until 1920. But then you'll notice that after the Second World War, the British Empire just disintegrates.
The way you feel. One kiss is all it takes. Falling in love with me.
That might be something that happens to empires revolving around a single guy, like Napoleon or Alexander's empires, but usually the longer an empire lasts, the longer it takes to fall. The actual reason behind why the British Empire collapsed can really be boiled down to 2 things. First, technological innovation. Second, good old-fashioned capitalism. In 1851, these great abstract entities of technology and capitalism were solidly in the pocket of the British Empire. The Industrial Revolution kicked off on their islands with the creation of the steam engine, and soon Britain was the sole industrial power in the world, able to pump out about 75% of the world's coal and 50% of steel, textiles, and pretty much anything else you could produce in a factory. All British. People tend to flex when they run into a bunch of money. Nothing inherently wrong there. You just need to have an eye for when things start taking a downward turn. The British didn't. The Great Exhibition, held in 1851, was a massive event hosted in the Crystal Palace, a giant structure assembled faster than any other palace in the world and completely made out of steel and glass. It was a huge feat of industrial capacity. There, European nations all brought the height of their industrial abilities to show off to the 9 million tourists that attended. Britain obviously had the most stands at the exhibition, outpacing their closest competitor, Prussia, by almost a 40% gap. But the problem is that Britain, in their grand celebration of their own achievement, failed to see the growing giants that would eventually be looming over them. See, the British attendees were already familiar with British goods. The industrial innovation was the Subway Surfers gameplay of the 19th century. That is a horrible metaphor. Fuck it, I'm running with that. So only people with weird shit made with industrial techniques got any attention. From Germany, Alfred Krupp introduced a superior quality of steel that could be made into cannons, a technology that the British hadn't yet gained a foothold in. And from 1850 onward, German steel would prove to be generally better than anything made in Britain. From America, Samuel Colt showed off the Colt revolver, capable of firing 6 shots before needing to be reloaded. I'll be real, that's in character. Colt almost immediately got a contract from the British military, as most British firearms were still just single-shot muzzle loaders. By the time of German unification in 1871, British industry only made up a third of the world's capacity, with Germany and America quickly gaining on them, at 13% and 23% respectively. Seeing the competition becoming hot for the first time in a while, the British industrialists tried to look for something that would shoot them ahead in the race. One particular industrialist invented a steam boiler that he was able to make a completely steam-powered vehicle with. These were the first buses and were implemented in Britain as an alternative to public transit by train. And let's be frank here, that's a fucking innovation. Although, you may notice that we do not live in a steampunk world where all of our machines are powered by steam. Nor do we live in a world where the British auto industry is particularly renowned or advanced. No equivalent to Ford or Volkswagen or Honda. Every bus in the Balkans is a Mercedes. Yes, you have your Jaguars, your Aston Martins, and Rolls Royces, but Mini is owned by BMW, and your Bentley's a fucking Volkswagen. So take a fucking guess what happened. People complained about the buses. They scared horse-drawn carriages, they endangered pedestrians, they damaged roads. Railroads, who had a vested interest in keeping these buses off the streets and killing this industry, turned up the media campaign on getting those buses negative press. And the government, in their infinite wisdom, sided with the lobby that had more cash on hand and set up some regulations. You want to enter this here city, you gotta pay a toll for that. Or are you going more than 5 miles an hour? You got a license for that. Or you want to drive a bus, mate? You gotta have a chap with a little flag walk in front of you. Man's got a signal to use when you gotta stop and help the horses. Right, and you gotta help the horses. You what, mate? You think this is rubbish? Well, that's a fine for you. 10 quid. A year after all of these regulations went into effect, the first internal combustion engine was revealed at Paris. Germany and America became the automobile giants of the world, even though Britain had a massive lead on them. And Henry Ford was famously the man who introduced assembly lines to America. Ever since then, America's economy has been the biggest in the world, hands down. Britain similarly just through other industries like steelmaking. The Bessemer process of melting and casting steel, for some fucking reason, didn't interest any of the British industrialists. But the Americans took Henry Bessemer up on it, and eventually it made its way to Andrew Carnegie, which is why half the streets and buildings from here to Pittsburgh are named after him. So it's clear that the gods of innovation had left Britain's side by the time the 1900s rolled around. But what about capitalism? Well, a major part of keeping capitalism on your side is making sure you stay competitive. So, safe to say, the policies of the British government were also undermining their economy's competitiveness. See, when you produce half the world's industry, you can't sell all that stuff to people in your own country. So when fortune favors you such that your country is a massive exporter of in-demand goods like steel, coal, textiles, etc., it's a great idea to push for free trade. That way you get access to other markets and have way more customers to sell to. Britain had been arm-twisting other countries like China into removing tariffs and barriers to trade because having better access to those markets would be a huge gain for them. So when Germany and America overtook Britain's production, Britain stopped being such a big exporter and more often would start to import. When you import, free trade isn't that great an idea anymore. I'm from the Midwest. I would know. In order to protect your economy as an importer, you need barriers to trade like tariffs in order to defend domestic production. Fail to do this and your domestic ability to produce starts slipping. The incentives move overseas. You start relying on other countries for food and materials. You start thinking you don't need farmers or factories and start legislating for other priorities at the cost of those farmers and factories. If you import all your grain from Ukraine and Russia, what do you think happens when war breaks out? Food prices spike, and local farmers are too hemmed in by regulations to keep up with the deficit. If sweatshops in Vietnam and China can get away with paying their workers a penny an hour, what do you think happens when American workers need more than that to survive in a wealthier economy? Or when the government starts hiking regulations? All the factories leave America. To be clear, I'm not advocating for sweatshop-like conditions for American workers, but you have to incentivize industry to stay in your country. Otherwise, it's just gonna leave. Unfortunately, the British government hadn't realized that the situation had changed. And when they did realize something needed to be done, their attempts at reform were still colored by this desire to maintain free trade. One of their ideas was to mark all British-made products with Made in Britain, and all German-made products with Made in Germany. The thought was that people would buy the British goods because the British goods were so superior, obviously. And that was not true, like at all. So the Made in Germany stamp actually ended up being more of a mark of good craftsmanship and a marketing tactic than a deterrent. The British never really left behind their free trade doctrine, and their insistence on sticking to it rather than being adaptable still hurts this country to this day. I will give the British this. The empire was well organized enough to the point where it was able to stick around and keep growing even after the US and Germany had surpassed it. However, its collapse was a long time coming. And with 2 world wars, the homeland could no longer hold its empire together and crumbled under the weight. That's kind of the video. That's it. That's how Britain fumbled the bag. That's the title. That's what the title of the video is. So yeah, I'm back. I'm not gonna make any promises, but I have written 2 videos revolving around some cool Bronze Age world building stuff. All my most popular videos, aside from the one Germany video, are world building related. So I kind of want to lean into that a little bit. And I also want to make some videos about other projects that I'm working on, since people apparently seem to be interested in that more than like historical summary. Though I have a couple other ideas, and I'll list some out, and you guys tell me what you think. American ranks Canadian provinces based on how funny their beef with other Canadian provinces is. US states ranked based on how well a European could survive there. France isn't actually that terrible, but people who like Paris are. What if Tolkien was Chinese? That's not an alternate history video. And you know how like whenever people make Asian fantasy or Middle Eastern fantasy, it's always like, oh, this is just China, or this is just Japan with a different name. While I myself am quite guilty of that style of world building, I would like to try my hand at creating something a little more ambiguous that draws from a general like East Asian flavor that is less China and Japan centric, while not also picking another country to be like 90% of the world building. That's what that idea is. How Spain fumbled the bag. I found out while traveling that a lot of people in finance don't fucking know how the Spanish ruined their economy, which is kind of a recent thing, historically speaking, and also is pretty reminiscent of what's happening to our economy today. So that one might be a little important. 10 historical periods that should have more fantasy content about them. That one's just a top 10 list. I'm not trying very hard with that one. So yeah, tell me what you guys think of those. I have some other ones that I decided not to say because I think it'd be funny if I just posted them without any warning. Kind of like this video, actually. But yeah, that's been my show. I hope you guys will come back next time for whatever it is I work on, and hopefully it will be done in less than a month. We're shooting for 2 weeks.